welcome to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe in the studios of our flagship station, Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. In addition, today, as always, we're on the radio on 88.1 WBFH, The Biff. Our television stations from Civic Center TV to Birmingham Area Municipal Access in the Birmingham-Bloomfield area to City Cable 15 of Southfield are all on Comcast, Channel 15, and AT&T on Channel 99. You can also join us in Lake Orion on Orion Neighborhood Television and in Waterford on the Media Network of Waterford on Channel 10 there in the city of Waterford. Join us online on Facebook, facebook.com/Civic Center TV 15 and facebook.com/Lakes FM, and join us online on our website as well, civiccentertv.com. Click on that Watch Live link that's at the top of your homepage on your computer web browser and in the left margin on that drop-down screen on your mobile phone as well. And you can watch us online live on My Michigan TV or MyMy. Go to mymytv.com to subscribe for free and learn more about where you can watch MyMy live each and every day, including the Megacast live from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. You can do so on their website, but you can also do so on their app, both their smartphone app available on the Apple iOS store, App Store, and on the Android App Store, as well as on your smart TV. Places like Roku TV, Apple TV, Android TV, Samsung Smart TV, Amazon Fire TV, and more. Again, learn more information about My Michigan TV or MyMy by going to mymitv.com. mymitv.com. It's mymytv.com. Or learn more information about MyMy and all of our other partnering television, radio, and other media outlets each and every day on the Megacast by going to Civic Center TV's Megacast page by clicking on Megacast at the top of your homepage or in the left margin on that drop-down menu on your mobile phone. There you'll find links that will take you to the websites for each and every one of our partnering television, radio, and web outlets. So you can learn more about them, learn more about what they do throughout the other 22 hours of the day that they're not joining us live for this show, and find more information about their upcoming events and coverage in their communities and across the local area here in Oakland County and in southeastern Michigan. In addition, civiccentertv.com/megacast is where you can find all of our full interviews and our full episodes on demand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We usually have those posted for you by the mid to late afternoon of the day of our shows. Then at civiccentertv.com's coronavirus page by clicking on coronavirus on the homepage, or by going to civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. You'll find links to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the State of Michigan's Health and Human Services Department, and the Oakland County Health Division's COVID-19 individual web pages. Here you'll find more information on the efficacy of our vaccines, on the COVID-19 numbers here in the state of Michigan and across the U.S. And you can find more information about booster shots as well. Find more information about the efficacy of certain precautions that we take against COVID-19 and how they protect our communities from the spread of the coronavirus. And this is a great place to start if you want to do some of your own information gathering. They've done the research. You're getting it from accredited research institutes, from experts on the front lines who are working in medical fields, who are doctors, who are epidemiologists, virologists, who are on those front lines, researchers in the medical field that know what this information is about and can provide the context for this information so that you can make informed decisions in your life, and instead of doing your own research, which can be heavily flawed and you may not know exactly what to look for or what the context of the information you're gathering is, or you may be more easily misled, go to these resources. They have so much information about COVID-19, about the vaccines, about precautions, about the spread of the virus here in Michigan and across the U.S. and the world. Again, all that, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, including our top stories each and every day that we also post on there before our live shows. And today, more criticism coming in toward the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission after their initial first 4 drafts of potential district maps in the state that have been released and put into the second step of their public comment period throughout the state. Detroit officials and activists say that these proposed political maps are disenfranchising black voters. This article from our friends at the Detroit Free Press. Michigan's new Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission and the draft political maps that it has drawn are headed into a storm next week at the TCF Center in Detroit, to say the least. A day after the commission approved 10 maps with barely a hint of conflict, elected officials, ministers, and others interested in politics in Detroit on Tuesday raised virulent concerns that the nation's largest black majority city stands on the brink of having its preferred representation taken away in Lansing and in Washington, D.C. That, they say, is the effort of maps that would strip the state of all but a handful of state house districts where blacks outnumber whites and represent the majority of the population. And they plan to make themselves heard when the commission begins its public hearings next Wednesday in Detroit. Quote, "It's absolute insanity," said the Reverend Horace Sheffield III, a longtime radio personality, civil rights activist, and pastor. Pastor Sheffield continued on saying, quote, "It's disenfranchisement of the African American community, where we have significantly less representation and at one fell swoop by a supposedly nonpartisan process. There is something wrong with that," end close quote. In drafting maps, the 13-member randomly selected commission largely followed what has been instructed to do so by staff and experts, unpack overwhelmingly black districts in Detroit, designed a decade ago by Republicans in Lansing, and instead spread black voters across more districts. That gives Democrats a better chance of controlling a number of seats representative of their total vote share. But it also means that in 17 current congressional, state house, and state senate districts where blacks are the clear majority of voters, they will no longer retain that numerical edge, causing worries that whites and others may win seats in those areas, or that the commission's plans could run afoul of the Federal Voting Rights Act, which is intended to protect a cohesive minority's political ability to elect candidates of its choice. The commission's staff, however, says it has worked to ensure that the proposed maps meet the letter of the law. The map's 4 configurations of new congressional districts, 3 state house maps, and 3 state senate maps are only proposals, and the commission is expected to make changes after another round of public hearings beginning next week before a start of final rounds of drafting. But that's not doing much to settle the worries that opportunities to elect candidates of color could be hampered by whatever plan is settled on by the commission. Created by a statewide referendum in 2018, the Michigan Constitution now gives the commissioners, all novices in mapping political boundaries, final discretion in deciding what plans will look like. That said, compliance with the Voting Rights Act is mandatory, and it includes protections for minority populations. What it does not include, however, is a guarantee of districts in which a minority group is given the majority of the vote. Instead, a cohesive minority group's political will is supposed to be protected if it would be victim of racially polarized voting, meaning another racial group tends to vote as a bloc against the minority's preferred candidates. For instance, many of the current legislative districts in Detroit that are home to a black voting population over the age of 18 are well above 50%, including at least 4 state house districts with a black voting age population over 70%. 2 of the current state house districts, 7 and 8, have black voting age populations over 90%, a Free Press analysis of census records shows. A report from one of the commission's experts said House District number 3 was over 90%. The Free Press had that district instead at 89%. Bruce Adelson, the commission's voting rights attorney, has stressed that assigning additional minority votes to a district beyond what is needed to protect their opportunity to elect candidates of choice can create other legal problems. Where that line is hard to say, however. Some experts say a plurality of around 35 to 45% of a district's population gives it enough strength to elect its candidate and ward off any legal challenge. Some commissioners have expressed worry that the maps could diminish the voting strength of minority voters by splitting them up across too many districts. Quote, "Mr. Adelson, I appreciate all of the advice you've given us, but I've got to be honest, I'm becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the direction that we are going under," said Commissioner Anthony Eade during a commission meeting in early October. Eade pointed to an early draft of the district in Detroit with a 35% black voting population and questioned whether a primary election would advance a black candidate. And that's a concern. It's not all unusual for Detroit's political races to attract multiple candidates. If those candidates split the minority in a primary in the city, there is a possibility a suburban candidate, or if he or she consolidates the vote there, could win the primary and, in a district with a decided partisan lean toward Democrats, win the seat. Proposed political plans have districts with smaller percentages of black voters as well. In their current plans, the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission has proposed plans for Senate, State House, and congressional boundaries that would include a smaller share of black voters while increasing partisan fairness statewide. Here's a look at, this article does provide a look at how that would be applied. However, going back to the issues, particularly in Detroit among black voters, with this current proposal from the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, black elected officials and civil rights leaders in Detroit on Tuesday still argued that the resulting draft maps, however, would disenfranchise black voters in the city. State Senator Adam Hollier, a Democrat from Detroit, said there would be too few black voters to elect black candidates if any of the proposed maps are approved. Quote, "This was a conscious effort to try and meet what they thought was the criteria in drawing these maps," he said. Continuing on, "We're here to say collectively that not only is this not acceptable, but that's not what's supposed to be done," end closed quote. Representative Cynthia Johnson, also a Democrat from Detroit, said, quote, "What we currently have here right now is much better than what the commissioners are doing," end closed quote. That full article from the Detroit Free Press, which includes more analysis and even more quotes from people in the city and those associated with the commission, is on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, where in this case, just to summarize again, in the current proposed maps, more of the black voters in districts that have a majority of that minority category or demographic in their voting population are being spread out against among multiple districts, which then creates a situation where there's potential that black leadership or black candidates would have a tougher chance of being either re-elected to those positions and continue to represent those populations in those majority black areas or areas with a large minority population of black people and black residents there, and so that creates a big concern, which is why we're hearing so many voices speak up against the current maps, and we'll hear them speak in the public comment period. And if you have any issues with the current drafts, highly encourage you to see them. They are available through the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission to be reviewed, and they want you to review them. They want you to make public comment and provide that input, and hopefully they take that to heart as our populations, as our minority populations do deserve to have their due representation in our government. It's incredibly important because we do have a very diverse population here in the state of Michigan. According to the 2020 U.S. Census data, that population is getting even more diverse, which makes diverse leadership across our state, not only in our state government, but also on the federal side, that much more important, which is why it's really good to hear that those that are concerned, particularly in the city of Detroit, are stepping up and are speaking up and are making their voices heard. And hopefully more of our citizens, as well as these leaders, will also have their voices heard as well. And the commission will take that to heart as they make further plans. Also making headlines at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. We're going to skip forward to our third article posted there, and maybe we'll go back if we have time to the news that the U.S. will soon reopen land borders with Canada and Mexico to vaccinated individuals. But we'll skip to the third story on our website at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, where this may be a surprise to some of you, but getting vaccinated and wearing masks kind of helps prevent the spread of COVID-19. And according to Bridge Michigan magazine, Michigan college COVID outbreaks have plummeted as students vaccinate and mask up. Man, what a concept. Not like we've been hearing that from medical officials and experts about COVID-19 for the last year and a half plus. Central Michigan University student Maddie Clark said she was hesitant to get the COVID-19 vaccination last spring when it first became available. Then this summer, she learned that CMU was giving students a choice for the fall semester: get vaccinated or get a cotton swab up your nose once a week for testing. When the senior returned to Mount Pleasant in August, she headed straight to Walgreens. Quote, "I got my first dose my first day I came back," said Clark of Ypsilanti. She continued, "Coming back to school, being around a bunch of people, I thought it was time," end closed quote. A year ago, CMU and many other colleges in the state were scenes of large coronavirus outbreaks leading to public health emergencies and campus-wide quarantines of tens of thousands of students. Michigan State University closed most of its dorms for the fall of 2021, and virtually all classes at many colleges and universities were held online. That actually, there is an error in the article. It should be fall of 2020. We're in the fall of 2021, and those dorms are open. This year, outbreaks have dropped precipitously, and college campuses in Michigan are often safer from COVID than their surrounding communities. Some have strict vaccine mandates, including at the state's two largest university campuses, Michigan State University in East Lansing and U of M in Ann Arbor. Others, like CMU, give students a jab or test choice. Almost all have enacted, with little signs of protest, mask requirements inside campus buildings other than dorm rooms that have proven so controversial, however, in the state's K-12 schools. State data shows the pandemic safety measures appear to be working. Wow. That's a surprise. Not like that's exactly what the medical officials have been telling us for a year. A year ago, in the first week of October, months before the first vaccines were approved in the U.S., there were 4,902 new or ongoing cases of COVID connected to outbreaks at Michigan colleges and universities. Now, there are just 445, an 11-fold plummet. With a mix of incentives and mandates, many Michigan colleges now have high vaccination rates. At U of M, where vaccinations are mandated this school year for students, staff, and faculty, 96% of students have their shots. At MSU, 90% of students are vaccinated. The uncontrolled spread of the virus is also down dramatically. The rate of students who test positive for COVID is just above 1% at both U of M and MSU, and half of that at CMU. All are in counties in which the test positivity rate is 5 to 10 times higher than on campus. Statewide, the positivity rate of COVID-19 tests over the past week is 11.2%. Again, for reference, that test positivity rate being 11.2% statewide. On the campuses of MSU and Michigan, it's hovering around 1%, and it's even less than that. Actually, it's about half of that at Central Michigan University. Just for some context of just how effective by those metrics alone, although there's more factors that go into it as well, of course. The COVID-19 precautions such as mask wearing, distancing, and vaccination can be in preventing the spread. Those data points are, quote, a very good sign of what's happening on campus, said Linda Vale, an Ingham County health officer whose jurisdiction includes Michigan State University. Quote, we're in a completely different place than we were a year ago. That full article on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, it provides even more context into the relationship between vaccination efforts and high vaccination rates on our college campuses, and pretty extensive, although maybe not as extensive as a year ago, policies on these campuses as well, and how they're preventing the spread of COVID-19, even in comparison to the rest of the county in which they are placed in. Very critical information, and if you're skeptical about just how effective these policies can be, that's a great example right there. Of course, you can also find other information that can either support or negate that opinion, depending on the research that's being done, depending on the information that you're looking at. We highly encourage you to get all that information that you need to formulate a strong opinion and make the right decision for yourself and your family and those around you by going to our website at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, where you'll find that information that you need, at least a very good starting point from reliable, trustworthy, factual resources from experts at the Centers for Disease Control, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Oakland County Health Division. We have a great show ahead of you today. We'll start off the show by talking about politics with the professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, Dave Dulio. That's coming up next at 10:20. At 10:40, Latanga Hopes, the media relations specialist from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, will join us to talk about relief that is available to Michigan residents here in Oakland County and surrounding counties as well as a result of some of those 100-year storms and 500-year floods over the summer. At 11 o'clock, Corey Ross, the co-producer of the immersive Van Gogh exhibit, will join us. And then at 11:20, I'll be joined by the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at my alma mater, Michigan State University, Dawn Kepler, will join us at 11:20. And then we'll cap off the show at 11:40, talking about high school sports with Geoff Kimmerly, the Communications Director at the Michigan High School Athletics Association. That is all coming up next on a packed edition of the Megacast that will be back after this break.
Why did you get your kids vaccinated?
You
was hard for them to social distance, to be isolated from their friends.
I want them to get back to school and sports games. So as a pediatrician, I recommend the vaccine to everyone I know.
The boys lost a former teammate and classmate who was only 20 years old. It's been a devastating year.
We want to get back to normalcy. Our daughter is really looking forward to being with her friends, being a kid.
It's the Great Lakes water, and so what people do ends up in our waterways.
Flushable wipes are just evil. They should be thrown away. They're impossible to destroy, and they can cause significant problems.
One of the main things when you're cooking is to not dump fats, oils, and greases down your drains.
They stick to the sides of pipes, they stick to everything they come in contact with. Don't put it down the sink.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
When times get dark, we can't see the help that's all around us. When you don't know where to turn, let 211 be your guiding light.
How can I help you?
Our guides are ready to connect you with the help you need. For help with food, healthcare, mental health, and other resources, call 211 or visit 211.org. 211. Get connected, get help.
Welcome back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Calvin Brown in our studios here in West Bloomfield Township, where we broadcast live from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, Monday through Friday on the Megacast. Learn more about our show, all the places that we are broadcasting live, and everything else that they do throughout the other 22 hours of the day, and view all of our programming, full episodes, and each individual interview on demand at our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. We're pleased to be joined once again by Dave Dulio. He is a professor of political science at Oakland University and the director for its Center for Civic Engagement. And he joins us now once again on the Megacast. Dave, thanks for being with us today.
Good morning, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. So let's start off with the Center for Civic Engagement, because the programming there is back. It's a really great concept you have over there. You talk about political topics, you talk about topics that affect our communities, but also, and more importantly, especially in the times that we're in now, politically especially, open that dialogue, a civil dialogue among people where they can have their opinions heard, they can share ideas and maybe find some common ground on these issues, and you bring in experts as well that can help to provide more context and more information than maybe you are able to provide or other professors at Oakland University are able to provide, because these experts have a greater level of expertise in those particular areas. A really interesting one that's coming up soon, actually Thursday night at 7 o'clock, is entitled The Changing Landscape of College Athletics, and it is a virtual panel discussion on how college athletics are already changing or will continue to change in the future as the NCAA and other organizations have opened up their previous restrictions on the sale and the advertising of players and their athletes and their name, image, and likeness. This is a really packed lineup. Guests include Jay Billis from ESPN, Oakland University men's basketball coach Greg Campy, 97.1 The Ticket afternoon drive co-host Rico Beard will also be the moderator of that. Can you tell us a little bit about what they will be speaking about on this very complicated topic that's still really in its infancy of being enacted across the NCAA?
Yeah, Tyler, you hit on a number of really good points there. You know, one of the things that I really like about the direction we're headed with the center is to show folks on campus and off campus that civic engagement really reaches every corner of campus. And as you know, we've talked about things we've done at the center previously that have partnered with, say, the School of Business or the Department of Sociology or the Department of Communications or the School of Nursing, right? Well, this time we're reaching across campus to athletics. And, you know, there is this connection of civic engagement here because it's political. and not in a partisan sense, but in a governmental sense. And here in Michigan last year, we had bills introduced in the House and Senate, State House and State Senate, that were eventually signed by the governor that permit student athletes now to profit from the use of their name, image, and likeness. And also included on the panel that you described is State Representative Joe Tate.
Yes.
One of the sponsors, co-sponsors of that legislation. And one of the things about Rep. Tate that is, in addition to being a state rep and one of the co-sponsors of this legislation, he played football at MSU. And so he knows what it was like under the old regime, right? Where you weren't able, or student athletes weren't able to do that sort of thing. And so we'll talk to him about the legislation. We'll talk to some of our student athletes about how they're navigating the changing landscape of college athletics. And it goes beyond the name, image, and likeness issue to the transfer portal. There are Supreme Court decisions that are impacting student athletes. So we're going to talk about all of that with, as you say, a packed panel of experts.
Yeah, and all this really circles back to a decades-long issue with the NCAA, and a really long-time issue. It's been a debate for a number of years without a whole lot of action taken on it, other than the antitrust lawsuit, of course, famously O'Bannon versus the NCAA, that was ultimately decided in 2014, which was brought up by former UCLA basketball player and later NBA basketball player Ed O'Bannon. And this is not entirely a political issue that people would think. People wouldn't typically think of this as being a major political issue, but it is, because it affects people's representation in their communities, at pillars of their communities, such as universities, and even within those universities, their athletics programs that are often what attracts a lot of people to either visit or patronize the campus, to donate to the university, or even in some cases to go to the university, whether it be student athletes or not. And that representation also includes a massive profit for a lot of these universities, particularly those blue blood programs in major sports like football and in basketball and others. And with all the discussion we've had over the past year and a half, 2 years about representation, particularly for people in Black, Indigenous, and people and person of color populations and BIPOC populations that make up a large sum of our student athletes, this becomes a very important topic, especially considering that the amount of money that has been generated through these athletic programs over a number of years that these players have not seen a dime of.
Right, and I'll take it even a step further and say that it's a political or civic issue. And let me I should have said this before, but this was bipartisan legislation that was passed in the State House and State Senate and then signed by Governor Whitmer last year. We shouldn't forget that. This is a great example of in time where, as we've talked about before, where we don't see examples like this very often, but a great example of a Democrat and Republican coming together to write legislation that it advances through the legislative process. But I'll take it beyond political and civics and say it's about rights, right? The ability of a student athlete to control the use of his or her own name, image, and likeness. We're seeing sort of more freedom for student athletes with transfer portal and other aspects of maybe being able to get more benefits from a college or university that, as you say, many of them make millions of dollars and benefit from these student athletes taking the field or taking the court.
Yeah, and it also benefits those athletes that maybe are not in those sports of heavy spotlight, but are athletes on their campus. If you're able to be an MSU athlete, you are someone that has a lot of attention garnered toward you in East Lansing. Whether you're playing in a major sport that garners a lot of attention, like the football team or the basketball team, but if you're a volleyball player there, if you're a swimmer there, if you are on the rowing team there, you're able to get those sponsorships where local businesses benefit from having that representation representation and that association in one way or another with the athletics program at Michigan State University, albeit not a direct representation of that because it's through these individual players and athletes themselves. But it provides benefits to the community, and it provides benefits to a lot of these athletes down the line, not only those in the more profitable, so to speak, sports like basketball or football at the NCAA level, but those that are playing other sports as well that have the similar struggles of being a full-time student athlete as they do in these other high-profit sports, but get even less representation and are even less less thought of in these situations when we're talking about the representation of these athletes and what they benefit from in terms of their athletic programs.
Sure, it really, it opens it up to for lack of a better term, a capitalist market, right? Where anybody can go out and profit from a sponsorship deal. If they can get it, they can benefit from it. And we're seeing some unique ones that are popping up. I've read about some players on some football teams that are sponsored by barbecue restaurants, right? And they get paid in barbecue, right? Well, that's not a bad deal for those for those folks, right? There's an interesting one at MSU, right, with the donor who is going to sponsor every member of the football team and basketball team. Yeah. And that's an interesting one too, because it gets at the fact that a lot of this is yet to be ironed out, and we're not really sure how all of this is gonna shake out. There's gonna have to be adaptation. There's gonna have to be change, really from athletics departments. And questions about equity will come in. You mentioned the ability of swimmers and divers and golfers and soccer players to get into that capitalist market. But if some student athletes are highlighted more than others, does that create a tiered system? And I think athletics departments are going to have to figure that out, right? This is kind of a new world of college athletics, and that's what we're going to try to. We're not going to solve anything tomorrow evening when we talk about this, but we're going to try to dig into some of those questions and problems that might come up, and just talk about it and see where everybody is.
Yeah, and if you're a sports aficionado, if you're an expert in this area, you probably have a decent idea about what's going on already, and you probably understand it pretty well in the context of how it does impact our communities politically. But if you're not, and you're just either a casual sports fan or you're not a sports fan at all, this is an important issue that's going to continue to be impactful in our college communities for years to come into the distant future. And so getting that context is really important. We're joined by Dave Dulio. He's a professor of political science at Oakland University and the director of its Center for Civic Engagement that will hold that the changing landscape of college athletes virtual panel discussion. Again, that is Thursday night at 7:00 p.m. But Dave, we have a lot of other important things to be talking about at the state level. The state budget, of course, recently was signed into law by Governor Whitmer. It highlights a lot of investment in a variety of other different programs, such as childcare, especially both providing more affordable childcare and incentives to those that are working in the industry or would be potentially working in the industry to provide greater care, and it's also providing more of an emphasis on a number of other issues we've talked about over the past year, such as environmental issues, such as PFAS, improving infrastructure. This is a bill that, like any other budget, this budget was highly debated among the two parties in Lansing, both the Republican-led legislature and the Democratic governor's office. But it really did seem that in the end, they were able to come to a compromise in a lot easier of a fashion than we normally see when it's typically in the past been very down to the wire with the threat of a shutdown.
Certainly at the federal level, no doubt, right? I do think that the last couple of years have seen the budget process go longer than it did, say, during the Snyder administration, yes, when these were usually wrapped up in the summer. And some of that's undoubtedly divided government at work, right? Where, as you mentioned, right, we've got a Democratic governor and a Republican-controlled legislature. But you make a really good point again, is that, you know, they got it done in a compromise manner to a large degree. Now, there are certainly things that were included that that the governor didn't like, and she used the line item veto power that she has to knock out some of those. And, you know, it's all part of the process.
We're joined by Dave Giulio. He's a professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. And at the federal level, you talked about negotiations on budget issues, but there's also been a really interesting dynamic there, particularly in the Democratic Party on infrastructure issues, because the Democratic Party, they have the presidency, they have the majority in the Senate, they have a slight majority in the House, and yet they're not able to seem to come together and get to the finish line on a lot of these issues, particularly the Build Back Better Act. What exactly is for those that maybe aren't familiar, is the issue there, and what are the chances that this legislation actually goes through in a timely manner?
Well, and we've passed the point of it going through in a timely manner, right? This has been on the table for months. You know, what's the issue? Well, it's a number of things, right? I mean, it is on one level, it's the rules of the United States Senate, where Democrats are going to use a process called budget reconciliation to get this through, maybe. With only 51 votes rather than the 60 votes that would normally take to move controversial legislation through that chamber. And I say they may move it through because Democrats aren't united on this. And you're seeing this play out with not only within the Democratic Party, but across chamber, right? The U.S. House has got a bit of a different position on the Build Back Better plan than the United States Senate does. The different senators like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema have got their priorities, where the progressive wing of the party that's really more powerful, I would say, in the House has got its priorities. But then, of course, you've got Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the U.S. Senate. So it's really this mix of positions and priorities that these different wings of the party are trying to figure out. And, you know, it all is going to depend on if the Democratic Party can compromise within its own caucus, really, between the progressive wing and the moderates who've got some real power here because the majorities, as you mentioned, are so thin.
And there's also been a lot of discussion, once again, at the federal level, in regard financially, about reaching the debt ceiling. And in the past, this has been something that's been debated, and it's been used kind of as a political. The debate has been used kind of as a political weapon, depending on the party that is in the presidency, and if their opposition party is in any majority in the House or in the Senate. In this case, the president and the Democratic Party are insistent on raising the debt ceiling and to be able to make sure they don't default on the country's loans. The Republicans seem to be, particularly Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, tends to be or has been trending as of late on we don't want to negotiate on that, which we know he does. We know that they do. We know that they don't want the country to default on their loans, but they're using this as a political tool. What ultimately is the goal here? Where is the finish line for the Republicans in being more resistant this time around to raising the debt ceiling, when in the past it's been an issue, but it's been usually resolved pretty quickly because both parties want the same thing. Let's not default on our country's loans.
Right. You know, I think that one of the things we're seeing play out is the heightened use of this process of budget reconciliation. Democrats are going to use it, as we said, to potentially push through this Build Back Better plan, which, you know, we should note is undefined at this point, right? Because there's these negotiations going back and forth between the White House, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema on one side, and the progressive wing of the party on the other side. There's no final legislative text yet for us to even look at, but but they're going to use this budget reconciliation process. That is what the Republicans want to force Democrats to use to raise the debt limit moving forward. And for weeks and weeks, Democrats had said that they didn't have enough time because the reconciliation process can really drag out because of the way that it moves through the U.S. Senate and the House for that matter. It can take a long time. Not necessarily will take a long time, but it can. So in the last couple of weeks, we saw the Republicans relent a little bit and say, okay, we'll vote to raise the debt limit here, or we'll let you bring the debt limit bill to the floor of the Senate for a vote. But only for a couple of months, which now gives Democrats plenty of time, says Leader McConnell, to use that reconciliation process to raise the debt limit much farther out into the future. And the real difference between now and previous attempts and successful attempts to raise the debt limit is, the folks in the minority party didn't stand in the way of bringing it up, right, through a filibuster. That's what Republicans have done this time until they relented previously. But there has been a pretty partisan split vote when that has come up in the past, where the majority party, whoever's in the majority party, votes for it, those in the majority party vote against it, just so that they're not on record as raising the debt limit more than they have to be.
We're joined by Dave Dulio, professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. And Dave, in terms of the Democratic Party and their own divisions, it's been mostly noted among Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who are from West Virginia and Arizona, respectively, and their reluctance to follow along with party lines, particularly when it comes to the Build Back Better Act. Given that there is a majority for the Democratic Party right now, given that Joe Biden's presidency is still in its first year, in its infancy here, and knowing that the 2022 election is going to be heavily impacted by the first year and a half to 2 years of the Biden presidency and of this majority, what are the concerns within the Democratic Party right now, or at least even particularly with Joe Manchin and with Kyrsten Sinema and others that are in their same camp on the Democratic side on Capitol Hill? What are their thoughts on how this may impact the 2022 election? Because, of course, they want their party to remain in power, but these actions and not being able to pass this legislation through, slowing down the processes of some of the work that the Biden administration would want to do, may very well cost them some critical elections in 2022. What is the thought process here?
I think there are competing thoughts, right? I mean, because you could look at this a couple of different ways and several different ways. Actually, one of those ways is to look at, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but focus on Manchin because he's been around longer and he's got more of a track record on this sort of thing, right? He just doesn't support some of the stuff that's in the progressive plan. He comes from West Virginia. That's a state that Donald Trump won by 40 points in 2020, right? That is a conservative state. It's a Republican state, even though Manchin's a Democrat. But he's a conservative Democrat, which are, that is a disappearing breed these days. And he's just not going to vote for stuff that he doesn't want. And there seem to be plenty of conflicts now between that progressive wing and where Manchin is. And if they're going to get something done, somebody's going to have to give, and they're both going to probably have to give, and we'll see if they can do that. But to your question about 2022, right, there are competing problems right now with the Democrats, right, where if those on the sort of more centrist, moderate side of the Democratic spectrum, they are concerned that if a far left progressive bill gets pushed through, that they will lose independent and moderate voters, and that they will then vote for Republican candidates in House and Senate races in 2022. The progressives are concerned that if the plan isn't as progressive as they want it to be, many on the party's left base will stay home. not that they'll vote for Republicans, but that they will just not participate in 2022. Therefore, being almost as big of a problem at the ballot box as a Democrat who crosses over and votes for a Republican. So this is, on some level, I'm not going to say that the debate that's happening and the negotiations that are happening are about 2022. I think that they are really genuinely trying to pass policy at this point. But we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't think that it had an impact or potential impact on the outcome of Election Day that's going to happen in about a year.
We're joined by Dave Dulio, professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, that will be holding a panel virtually on Thursday night at 7 o'clock entitled The Changing Landscape of College Athletics. Dave, before we let you go today, where can people find that link and gain access to that virtual panel?
Sure, thanks, Tyler. They can go to oakland.edu. There's a story on the main OU webpage about the panel. If you don't see it right away, you can click through a couple of pages, or you can go right to oakland.edu/poli-sci/CCE to get to the Center for Civic Engagement website. But oakland.edu will get you there too.
Well, Dave, we appreciate it. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. He's the director for the Center of Civic Engagement and a professor of political science at Oakland University. Again, that panel, that virtual panel, Thursday night, 7 o'clock. It is the changing landscape of college athletics. Thanks, Dave, for joining us on today's show. We're going to take a break. On the other side, we'll be joined by FEMA Media Relations Specialist Latanga Hopes, who will tell you about ways that if you were affected by the storms and the floods on June 25th and 26th this past summer, there is some federal relief opportunities that are available to you. She'll tell you how to get access to that next when she joins us on the Megacast.
People are getting out to walk and bike in higher numbers. More vulnerable road users and higher speed traffic can be a dangerous combination. Crash severity has increased, so if you're driving, be sure to slow down and look for people. There's no need to speed. If you're biking, ride with traffic. If you're walking, avoid stepping into the road if possible. If you have to walk in the street, walk facing traffic. Learn more at walkbikedrivesafe.org.
When times get dark, we can't see the help that's all around us. When you don't know where to turn, let 211 be your guiding light.
How can I help you?
Our guides are ready to connect you with the help you need. For help with food, healthcare, mental health, and other resources, call 211 or visit 211.org. 211. Get connected, get help.
Now, over the summer, we had a number of different significant storms and flooding incidents, 100-year floods, 500-year floods, whatever you want to call them, and that incurred some significant damage to a lot of homes and a lot of other areas across the state of Michigan, including here in southeastern Michigan in Oakland County, and that has led to response, of course, from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And we're pleased to be joined now by FEMA Media Relations Specialist Latanga Hopes to talk about some of the services being provided through FEMA for those that were affected by these storms. Latanga, thanks for being with us.
Tyler, thank you for having us on to be able to talk about this important event.
Absolutely. So the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has opened a disaster recovery center in Southfield, and it's been open since Wednesday, October 6th, to help renters, homeowners, and business owners affected specifically by the June 25th and June 26th severe storms and flooding. That center is located in the Southfield Center City Office Buildings Complex at 26,000 Evergreen Road in Southfield, Michigan. So, Latanga, just give us an overview of what can be obtained at this recovery center, what people can seek from assistance from FEMA that people that may have been affected by these floods in June can seek, and how this came to be here in Oakland County.
Okay. First of all, I would like for your listeners and your audience and your anybody viewing to know that the first thing that they can get is good, sound information about how to apply for FEMA. And then after they learn information about how to apply, there's also assistance with the application. We can tell them what they will need. We can help them with the criteria of what it is that we're looking for to try to help them with in their recovery process. All disasters pretty much have a calling card that are consistent with whatever the disaster is related to. And with floods, what we're finding is a lot of people are having problems with appliances and structural damage. And remember, our goal is always to make sure that you're safe, sanitized, and functional. So when we hear about people that are coming in and telling us about the fact that their basements are flooded, there's a consistency that we're looking for with that. Listen carefully is what I would say to anybody that's applying and comes into the Disaster Recovery Center to what the representative is asking. There may be something that you may have that fits outside of that guideline, and that's great. Just make sure that you are able to get pictures and that you're able to describe it. There's one more thing I want to add. The reason we're doing this is because I want anybody that goes into the Disaster Recovery Center to be goal-oriented. You're going in to become eligible for FEMA grants. So the eligibility process is your goal. And in order to do that, make sure you listen carefully, read carefully, and process accordingly.
We're joined by Latanga Hope. She is a FEMA Media Relations Specialist joining us today to talk about FEMA's Disaster Recovery Center that is open now in Southfield, located at 26,000 Evergreen Road. This is to help homeowners, renters, and business owners that were affected by the flooding events on June 25th and June 26th as a result of the severe storms and flooding over the summer. And Latanga, we had so many storms in proximity of that June 25th and June 26th storming event. Does this cover just specifically those that were affected by the storms in that 2-day period, or can this also apply to those that were affected by other storms in the days and the weeks following that 2-day period?
We are still incident oriented, meaning that we are still focused on the June 25th and 26th storms. And as we continue to work through that recovery process, what you've noticed is that with Macomb and Oakland counties, what we're finding is that there are people that incurred damages and were impacted by those storms that have yet to receive support and are still working on their recovery process. So what happens, and just to give you some insight about how this process works, it always starts as a whole community approach. So once the local government, the state government gets together with the federal government, they then assess what is the original need. So we're still working on June 25th and 26th. And as you know, Macomb and Oakland County were just recently added because, as I mentioned, there was definitely an outcry that there was support that was needed from that original incident. So we're continuing to focus, stay mission focused, and work on that one.
We're joined by Latanga Hope. She is the FEMA Media Relations Specialist joining us today on the Megacast to talk about a FEMA Disaster Recovery Center that has opened at the Southfield City Offices Building Complex, 26,000 Evergreen Road. Their hours, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Saturday. The center is closed today, recognizing the holiday Indigenous Peoples Day, or Columbus Day on October 11th. So they are not open today, but regular hours are 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Before visiting a recovery center, survivors should register for federal assistance in one of the following ways. That is online at disasterassistance.gov, using the FEMA app, or by calling 800-621-3362. Again, 800-621-3362. For TTY users, that is 800-462-7585. TTY users, 800-462-7585. 85. And Latanga, like you said, when you go to one of the disaster recovery centers, you want to be goal-oriented. You want to be very as detailed as possible as you can be when providing that information to FEMA. When people are registering for that assistance, for federal assistance, in one of those ways that I just mentioned, what should they be going into that with? What should they be prepared for in the process of applying for such assistance before they go to one of these centers?
Oh, Tyler, that's a really great question. I'd love to answer that one. You would consider the fact that you're going in as if you were even applying for a new home or a new facility to rent or anything that would have some type of financial transaction. So you're going to take anything that can verify who you are, anything that can verify where you live, anything that can verify where you are living now. There are some people that have come in and applied for assistance and have become eligible, and we've learned that their places were not habitable, meaning that we can also support if there are people that end up in situations where they cannot live in their homes. We can provide rental assistance until their homes become ready. So in that process, you may need to bring an address proving that you are not living in your home, you're living someplace else. We can help you with that process and find someplace that you can rent until your home becomes ready. So bring that information with you as well. Your social security number will be needed. Anytime the government is giving you money, they're going to want to track that information. Bring a lot of patience and work through that process.
We're joined by Latanga Hope. She is the Federal Emergency Management Agency Media Relations Specialist, joining us today to talk about a disaster recovery center that has opened in Southfield to address renters, homeowners, business owners, and more who were affected by the June 25th and 26th severe storms and flooding. And Latanga, maybe this is outside of your purview, but in regards to the other storming events, is there any discussion so far? Are you aware of any future disaster declarations or assistance that may be available to those that were affected by storms beyond that date?
That would be out of my purview, okay. And this is the reason why. Let me give you some information. We would tend to yield to the people that would know best on how they would want to handle the events that's unfolded within their communities and within their state. So we would yield, not that we would not be incapable of taking care of it, but we would yield to whatever their direction would be. And that would be, again, on a community effort starting locally and then also with the state. And if they were to ask us to address any of the other events that's unfolded since then, FEMA always stands ready. We prepare. And just to give you one of our little mantras, we tend to say that FEMA works through disasters before, after, and during the disasters. So we will then reply accordingly. We're prepared. We plan for things like this.
Yeah, so this has been, so then that clarifies that this disaster relief has been something that was requested from local and state officials to FEMA saying, hey, we need additional assistance for this. We have done all that we can to address this issue, but this is well beyond what we are capable of doing alone. We need FEMA's assistance. And from that point forward, the Federal Emergency Management Agency then went forth to set up this disaster recovery center and begin to address how the federal government can provide assistance in this disaster scenario, correct?
Very well synced. Yes, Tyler.
We're joined by Latanga Hope. She is a FEMA Media Relations Specialist, joining us to talk about the Disaster Recovery Center that's open in Southfield. That is at 26,000 Evergreen Road in the Southfield Center. Hours 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Saturday. That does not include today, on the day that we are recording and broadcasting this due to the holiday, but Tuesday through Saturday of this week, that office will be open. Before you go, you do need to register for federal assistance, either from disasterassistance.gov using the FEMA app or by calling 800-621-3362, 800-621-3362. For those using a TTY, that is 800-462-7585, 800-462-7585. And Latanga, just another couple minutes with you before we'll say goodbye today. When people do apply for this federal assistance and they do go to the Disaster Recovery Center. How soon after can they expect results from their case in terms of being approved for that federal relief, receiving that federal relief? What is generally the timeline in these manners?
In exceptional cases where people come in totally prepared, they have everything that we need, and we're able to expedite things without any hiccups or red tapes, they can see money in their accounts as early as 10 days. There are some people where the process can be completed within 2 weeks to 30 days. And then there are those that will end up, and this is very important, receiving a denial letter. And I'd like to address that very quickly. What happens when you receive a denial letter, FEMA is not stating that you are incapable of receiving support via grants from the federal government. What we are merely communicating is that there's a problem with your process. We encourage you to read carefully and to respond accordingly. I always use the analogy that sometimes people may click thinking that they're choosing Michigan. Miami is right up above that. And incidentally, if you're not paying attention, you may end up clicking on Miami as opposed to Michigan. Now, because this is a federal document, we cannot change that, although we know that you meant to click on Michigan. And it could be that simple. Sometimes it can be a bit more complicated, but you can work through that process. And if you don't agree with the process that we deny you for, and you feel that we have misunderstood what it is that you cited to be your incurred damages, please file the appeals. We are here to help. We just have to work through that process. Work with us. It usually benefits you.
We're joined by Latanga Hope. She's a media relations specialist with the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Their disaster recovery center has been set up in Southfield to address renters, business owners, and homeowners that were affected by the flooding events as a result of severe weather on June 25th and 26th of 2021. At the Disaster Recovery Center, you can do a number of different things, from register for FEMA assistance by using the phone banks at the center, check the status of your application, meet with an applicant assistance representative from FEMA, discuss the U.S. Small Business Administration's low-interest disaster relief loans, obtain information about additional resources available and how to reduce future damage, and more. Latanga, just another minute or so with you before we'll say goodbye today. Any other information that would be important for people to know about this disaster declaration, about receiving this relief that we haven't discussed yet today?
You just hit the nail on the head with all of the information you recently provided. We work in tandem with the SBA group, and we do this with the Small Business Agency, and we do it for a reason. There are people that have huge damages that they've incurred. And what happens is, should they find themselves in situations that they'll go, the safe, sanitary, and functional status does not work for them, and they're aiming to get recouped or to get their homes restored fully functional to a point that they go, this is not satisfying for me, Small Business Administration is available to make sure that if you'd like to take out a loan, they do this with low interest. I have a colleague that's available, and you may want to have them on to speak about that in detail, because that's a different lane, but I can tell you about the availability of that process and how it has been supportive, and they've made money available to people with small businesses, people that are renters, and even the homeowners. And again, these are very competitive rates, below standard rates, and they work with people as well to help with that recovery process.
Well, Latanga, we appreciate your time and giving us some more information about how people can receive this very necessary disaster relief in many cases to help them recover their homes and their businesses as a result of some of these 100-year and 500-year and 1,000-year storms and floods that we had over the summer. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Can I add one other element?
Sure, please.
Okay, we have DSA teams, disaster survivor assistant teams. They're out canvassing your neighborhoods. So you'll see people in blouse, they may have on something with something recognizable, but they're out knocking on doors, and they can provide you with some of the same assistance that you can get at the disaster recovery centers. Be sure to look for the FEMA decal. Be sure to look for a name badge, but they're there to assist and to help also. And I just wanted to put that information out there in case one of my team members knock on a door to assist.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for all the information, Latanga.
Thank you all very much.
Parents do a lot of worrying. Get your kids caught up on childhood vaccines to protect them from these 14 preventable diseases, and you'll have 14 fewer things to worry about. Vaccines are safe and effective and save lives. So let's get caught up on vaccines and worry about something else. Get the facts at ivaccinate.org.
We may come from different organizations,
but we work together to protect the Huron River for everyone.
Most of the pollution that goes into our rivers is carried by rainwater that flows off of roads, parking lots, and rooftops.
The leaves and bark of a single tree can retain a surprising amount of rainwater. Depending on its size and species, it could be 100 gallons or more.
It is estimated that an urban forest can reduce annual runoff by up to 7%.
Here's one thing that we know can help keep our water clean.
Plant a tree.
Plant a tree.
Plant a tree.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
One of the things you can look for in your friends is a change in behavior.
These can be big changes, they can be small changes in mood, physical appearance.
They may be sleeping less or sleeping more, drinking more, or their eating patterns may be different.
One big change that can be pretty obvious is change in motivation. Do they no longer want to play basketball? Do they no longer want to play video games?
Now that we're spending more time online and in virtual settings, it's really important to pay attention to the language that your friend is using and the words they're using to communicate.
So when we text our friends, are they taking longer amounts of time to respond? Are they not responding at all? You don't have to be an expert to try to recognize these signs. The second that you feel it in your gut and that you're concerned, that's the second to have the conversation and open the door to what might be going on.
Today, it is easier than ever to join Michigan's Organ Donor Registry and help build a bridge of hope for organ, tissue, and eye donation. Just one person can potentially save or help improve the lives of up to 75 people. By joining, your legacy could be the gift of life. Sign up today at michigan.gov/SOS or at any of the more than 145 Secretary of State self-service stations located across Michigan. Be part of Michigan's Bridge of Hope by adding your name to the Organ Donor Registry.
When times get dark, we can't see the help that's all around us. When you don't know where to turn, let 211 be your guiding light.
How can I help you?
Our guides are ready to connect you with the help you need. For help with food, healthcare, mental health, and other resources, call 211 or visit 211.org. 211. Get connected, get help.
How does marijuana affect the teen brain?
Our brains are still developing into our 20s.
With regular use, marijuana can affect teen brain development.
It can affect our brain's circuitry and blood flow and impair thinking, learning, and memory function,
which could hold us back from reaching our potential.
Don't let marijuana mess with your brain.
Get the facts at michigan.gov/drug-free.
Whether you're the city,
the county,
or the Huron River Watershed Council,
we work together to protect water resources for everyone.
Most of the pollution entering our rivers is carried by rainwater that runs off roads, parking lots, and rooftops.
A rain garden helps catch stormwater runoff.
Rain gardens and their plants help dirty runoff soak into the ground.
You can do your part to help keep our water clean.
Learn about rain gardens and native plants.
So consider a rain garden in your home landscaping.
Catch the runoff with a rain garden.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
You're listening to the Megacast on your radio homes, 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake and 88.1 WPFH Bloomfield Hills. More Megacast after this quick break.
I couldn't breathe at all. There was lots of talk about putting me on a ventilator. I thought I was gonna die. I was 39 weeks pregnant and had a scheduled C-section. During that time, I got COVID and was hospitalized for a month. I had a blood clot in my lungs. It caused me to go into right-sided heart failure. I was really scared. I kept texting my husband and my mom, telling them how scared I was, and I was worried that he was gonna grow up without a mom. And then I was worried if, when I did get home, that he wouldn't know who I was. You know, being 27 and a mom and a wife and having that all almost taken away from me. It's scary, and if a vaccine can prevent that from happening, why not? Get your vaccine. I don't want this to happen to anybody else.
A message from the staff of Michigan's Crime Victim Compensation Program.
Anyone can be a victim of crime
and suffer lasting trauma, physically, emotionally, and financially.
But you are not alone.
If you're struggling financially due to a crime,
we're here for you.
Find out if you qualify for crime victim compensation. Call 877-251-7373 or visit michigan.gov/crime victim.
A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Victim Services.
Welcome back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Calvin Brown in our studios in West Bloomfield Township. We appreciate you for bearing with us there as we had a little bit of issues with our scheduled guest at 11 o'clock. Of course, this is a show we do almost entirely virtually, bringing our guests, and it is entirely virtually for our guests who are coming in, and sometimes they have some technical problems. That is the case, unfortunately, with our friends over at the Immersive Van Gogh exhibit. We'll try to get them on another time to join us to talk about that, but they are unable to join us today. So while we have a little bit of extra time waiting for our next set of interviews, we'll continue the conversation instead by letting you know, again, all the resources we have for you about COVID-19 and how you can access not only this show, but our great partners and their content all across southeastern Michigan, here in Oakland County, and all across the state. You can find more information about the Megacast, learn what we're all about here, watch our full episodes on demand on your time, or to look through our full interviews and decide which are the most important topics of interest for yourself and for your family to watch over. And all of those episodes, all of those interviews are on demand at our website at civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you can find all of our interviews and all of our full episodes dating all the way back to the beginning of the show, back in March of 2020. And with our expanding coverage on television, radio, and on the web in the local area here in Oakland County and all across the state of Michigan, there are even more resources on the community level where you can engage with your local community through media outlets in your community, such as Orion Neighborhood Television over in Lake Orion, that is now with us on the Megacast each and every day, joining us throughout the day for replays as well. You can learn more about what they're doing and the great work that they do out in the Lake Orion community by clicking on their link that's on our website at civiccentertv.com/megacast. Same thing with our friends at the Media Network of Waterford in Waterford, City Cable 15 out of Southfield, and Birmingham Area Municipal Access out of the Birmingham Bloomfield area. It's also, we can learn more by clicking on the My Michigan TV link. This is a really interesting thing for you that we highly encourage you to subscribe. It is free to subscribe. You get content from across the state of Michigan from a number of different creators and are able to see work by Michiganders for Michiganders about the state of Michigan, including live programming such as the Megacast Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and such as Steve Leto Live, which is immediately following our show from noon to 1 on most days. They have other productions that they're doing today, I believe, so I don't believe that there is going to be a Steve Leto Live program today because of other great content, but you'll be able to see whatever does come on after our show today because of that change by going to their website at mymytv.com. That is mymitv.com, where you can also learn more information about where you can access My on your smartphone and on your smart TV, places like the iOS App Store, the Android App Store, and many smart TV application stores such as Roku TV, Samsung Smart TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, and Apple TV, and more. And again, all of this is free content from around the state of Michigan by Michiganders for Michiganders through My Michigan TV. And you can find all that information by either going to their website at MYMI-TV or MyMyTV.com, or by clicking on the My Michigan TV link at CivicCenterTV.com/Megacast. And then on CivicCenterTV.com/coronavirus, there's a ton of information about COVID-19 as it pertains to many of our local municipalities in Oakland County. You click on those individual links, such as the city of Pontiac or Auburn Hills, and they'll tell you exactly what's going on in those cities in regards to mitigating the issues of the COVID-19 pandemic, preventative measures that are in place that may affect a city business that you may need to take care of for yourself. You need to go in and pay your taxes or take care of a water billing issue. Are you able to do that at City Hall, or is that only online or only by the phone? Those questions can be answered by clicking on those links without having to dig through these municipalities' websites, some of which are more complicated than the others, some of which are not exactly easy to navigate in some cases. This takes you directly to the COVID-19 page that tells you exactly how this pandemic continues to impact your city or your town. We also have a link to the Oakland County Health Division, where you can find more information locally here in Oakland County about COVID-19 metrics in your city or in your area of the county, more information on the mask mandates that are in place for K through 12 schools. We'll learn more information about the COVID-19 data in our county to see where the numbers are trending, as well as information about COVID-19 vaccines and those vaccine booster shots if you're eligible for them. You can get that through their vaccine page, either oaklandcountyvaccine.com or by clicking on that Oakland County link on CivicCenterTV.com/coronavirus, navigating just a little bit down the page and clicking on their quick links Vaccine Hub, which will take you directly to that page. And you also, by clicking on that Oakland County link at CivicCenterTV.com/coronavirus, it gives you access to the Nurse on Call hotline, email line, and text line, so you can get your questions answered. And then at the State of Michigan link and the Centers for Disease Control link, we have helpful information from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, as well as the Centers for Disease Control and all of their research and all of their data and all their information about COVID-19, the vaccines, and more. On this page, we also post the top stories each and every day that are related to COVID-19 or even not related to COVID-19, but are important to our communities all across the state of Michigan. We read a couple of those articles earlier. We were a little bit crunched for time because they were quite extensive. Highly encourage you to read what we have posted for you on our website. Click on that link, support those local journalists, and read their entire articles, and even subscribe to those publications as well by going to our website at CivicCenterTV.com/coronavirus and clicking on those article links. But one that we did miss might be good news for a lot of you as well. They've been looking to travel across the border. The U.S. will reopen its land border with Canada and Mexico to vaccinated travelers in early November. This is from the Detroit News. The United States will open its land border with Canada and Mexico to fully vaccinated foreign travelers in early November in conjunction with its planned changes in rules for welcoming vaccinated international travelers through the air, federal officials said. The policy change, expected to be announced on Wednesday by Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, will mean reopening the Michigan border with Canada for the first time since March of 2020 to those people traveling to the U.S. for non-essential reasons, such as to see friends, family, or for tourism. The revisited policy comes months after pressure from lawmakers, local officials, and separated families on both sides of the border left frustrated by the seemingly never-ending border closure. Canada reopened its border to vaccinated U.S. travelers over 2 months ago. Quote, strong vaccination rates in Canada made the continued border shutdown absurd and unjustifiable, said U.S. Representative Brian Higgins, a Democrat and co-chair of the Northern Border Caucus, in welcoming the news. Quote, for months now, we've heard from businesses that are suffering and families distraught over the separation imposed by the continued border shutdown. The sigh of relief coming from the Northern Border communities following this announcement is so loud it can practically be heard on either side of the Peace Bridge, and closed quote. The change will take effect at a date to be determined in early November, at the same time the Biden administration begins allowing vaccinated foreign air travelers back into the country. That will include seeking attestations of vaccination status and spot checking travelers for verification of vaccination status, either by paper documentation or by digital means. The exact paperwork or digital proof that will be required is still being worked out in conjunction with the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is expected to issue guidelines to that effect in the coming weeks, according to officials. Quote, I am pleased that President Biden has set forward a public plan that will safely reopen the northern land ports of entry to vaccinated travelers, said Senator Gary Peters, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Senator Peters continued, quote, there is no travel restriction no question, travel restrictions at our northern border have caused significant disruptions and challenges for Michigan's cross-border communities and binational families, end close quote. In announcing the changes, senior Biden officials indicated a desire to have a consistent approach to land and air entry into the U.S. Starting in January, the vaccine requirement will also apply to both essential and non-essential travelers entering the U.S., meaning truck drivers and others who currently may cross the border for business, trade, and other purposes must also provide proof of vaccination against COVID-19. A different policy applies to people who have a lawful right to enter the U.S. and will be passing quickly through the port of entry, officials said. The U.S. land border with Canada has been restricted to all but essential travelers since March of 2020. Restrictions renewed last month go through October 21st. Beyond that date, the prohibitions will apply to unvaccinated foreign travelers traveling to the U.S. for non-essential reasons. For some months, Canada has been ahead of the U.S. in vaccinations, with 76% of its population fully vaccinated and 87% of those 12 years of age and older. That compares with 66% of the U.S. population vaccinated and 77% of those 12 and older, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That and all of our articles, as well as that helpful information about COVID-19 from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the State of Michigan's Health and Human Services Department, and the Oakland County Health Division, is on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, Dawn Kepler, the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at Michigan State University, will join me on the Megacast.
You see certain things get reincarnated in your children. My daughter is very much inspired by my wife's artistic pursuits. So my daughter started making necklaces. She makes what we call affirmation fashion. I tell her every day that your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. Your black is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. And if there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around, and I remember riding a bike and falling off and cutting myself, and me never just wanted to get back on it. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike, and you did. I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
Whether you're the city,
the county,
or the Huron River Watershed Council.
As partners working together to protect our water resources, we agree.
Pet waste is the source of harmful bacteria in the Huron River.
When it's left on the ground, it can wash into the storm drains.
These lead directly to our streams. No filters, no treatment.
Here's one thing we know that can help keep our water clean.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
Pick up pet waste and trash it.
So pick up pet waste and trash it.
There's one water, and it's ours to protect.
Welcome back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe here in our studios in West Bloomfield Township, where we broadcast live from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, Monday through Friday. Find all of our episodes on demand outside of that live period on our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, where you can also learn more information about all the television, radio, and other media outlets across the state that join us on the show every single day. We're pleased to be joined by Dawn Kepler, the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at Michigan State University, as students have returned to campus this fall, and it's a much more normal situation at our colleges here in the state of Michigan, the universities here in the state of Michigan, than last fall. Dawn, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate your willingness to put a spotlight on our students in recovery in particular, who have had a challenging time over the pandemic and are so incredibly excited to be back on campus.
Yeah, and let's begin by talking about that challenge, because for some of these students, these were issues pre-pandemic, and the pandemic simply just didn't help in the recovery process or in mitigating these issues or beginning that process. For others, the pandemic in some ways or another, either directly because of the isolation and all the effects that comes from that, or from other stressors in their life as a result of the pandemic, was what led them down a road where they needed to then seek those recovery efforts. Now that the students are back on campus, are you seeing a change in the trends that earlier on in the pandemic we were seeing take a really dangerous turn toward more students that were engaging in drug misuse or alcohol misuse?
Yes, and you make a great point about the isolation piece. So that has been a particularly difficult thing for our students to navigate over the pandemic. Even without the pandemic, isolation is the #1 risk factor students report to me that indicates that they are starting to face some challenges. And so the pandemic just made that all the more difficult for students to navigate their recovery. And we've seen a huge change in our student population since returning to campus. Students have had an opportunity to connect with peers, and peer support is so incredibly important in students' recovery and recovery pathway. And so for our students, being able to have weekly on-campus peer support meetings has been huge. To be able to have fun, sober social events and activities is also another big factor in their recovery. And being able to just have that feeling of connection has been huge for our students. The student population in general, not just our students in recovery, reported a 10% increase in stress at Michigan State University, according to our National College Health Assessment. And we also saw this in our students in recovery. And so having students back on campus where they can feel like they're more connected with academic resources in addition to recovery resources has been had a huge impact on our students.
We're joined by Dawn Kepler. She is the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at Michigan State University with us on the Megacast today. And Dawn, over the beginning of this school year, as students have been back on campus, have you noticed that them being back on campus has prompted a greater willingness to seek the recovery that they may need for some of these issues, as opposed to when they were off campus virtually during the pandemic?
Yes, that's a great question. And that has definitely been the case here at Michigan State University. The pandemic was a time of disengagement, with the guidelines being physically distancing. And so we saw students also socially distancing over the pandemic. And since returning to campus, we have increased the number of students who are engaged in our Collegiate Recovery Community services by 3-fold. And so we have many students who were just disengaged over that time, although doing well in their recovery. We also have many students who are new to recovery, who realized over the pandemic that they were facing some challenges with their substance use and are now seeking help, or began seeking help over the pandemic and now have found that they need to connect with other peers who are also navigating recovery as a way to help increase their support and have that safe community where they feel like they can have a real college experience and have fun and still be sober.
We're joined by Dawn Kepler. She is the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at Michigan State University. And Dawn, how do you get students through to students to about how they need to quickly address the alcohol and drug use, and how quickly that can become a problem if they continue to abuse these substances or misuse these substances and kind of pass it off as not being an issue, and then all of a sudden realize that it is later on down the road?
For our students, many of them have tried to manage their substance use on their own, and that is usually one of the biggest indicators for them that when they aren't able to reduce use or go out, and when they drink or use a substance drinking, for example, just have one drink. And so that's a big indicator for our students and us that they may need some additional supports and some additional help. We also have students that a big indicator for them that they might be challenged by substances or have a substance use disorder potentially is that it affects their relationships, it affects their academics. And so for us, it's really helping students look at how substances are affecting their lives and helping them navigate that. So our approach here at Michigan State University is student focused, is person centered. And so we help the students navigate that. We are really fortunate that we have amazing counseling supports for our students navigating substance use disorder. And so students are able to get that counseling assistance. And then when they are at a place where they feel like recovery is the choice for them that makes the most sense if they have a substance use disorder, we have the Collegiate Recovery Community here to offer those individual supports, as well as the group accountability and the peer supports that they get from other students also navigating recovery. On the other end of the spectrum here at Michigan State University, we also have prevention and early intervention supports as well. So we recognize that not all students have a substance use disorder. And at the same time, students might need some help figuring out how to navigate substance use in a way that's safe and to reduce harm. And so that's why we have our National Social Norms campaign here on campus, our DUCK campaign, as we lovingly refer to it, that helps students recognize how to safely engage in substances if that's something that they can do. Obviously, for our students in recovery, they have gone through the process and have identified that they are that they have a substance use disorder and that recovery is the pathway for them. And from there, we offer an array of services through the Collegiate Recovery Community. In addition to counseling support, we also have weekly peer recovery support meetings. We have fun, sober social events. We offer wellness workshops based on the needs identified by our students in our Collegiate Recovery Community. And we also do community service opportunities as well. In addition to that, with funding and support, amazing support we have through partnerships like the Children's Foundation and the Jamie Daniels Foundation, we're also able to offer live-in support for recovery housing. In Michigan, we are the first on-campus recovery housing being offered and the fourth in the Big Ten. So we're really excited about that opportunity and greatly appreciate the partnerships that have allowed us to have that live-in student position supporting our students in recovery housing.
So Dawn, when students join this program, is it voluntary? Is it on a referral base, or is it a little bit of both?
That is a great question. So it is a little bit of both. So we have a large number that are referred, many from on campus, either through counseling, from the student conduct system. We have students who are referred through our other campus partners, academic units on campus. We also have a large percentage who come to MSU specifically for our Collegiate Recovery Community and our recovery housing. So they do their research before transferring or deciding to apply to MSU, and they come here specifically because we have these supports specific for students in recovery.
We're joined by Dawn Kepler. She's the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at Michigan State University with us on the Megacast. And so Dawn, let's go a little bit through the process. When somebody is referred to the Collegiate Recovery Community or self-reports, what are the first initial steps that they go through in order to begin those recovery efforts in partnership with the university?
That's a great question. And one of our very first steps is to create a welcoming environment for the student. We recognize that for students navigating recovery, a college campus can be a difficult environment for them. Research has shown that college environments tend to not be supportive of recovery. There tends to be a party culture. And so for us, it's really creating that welcoming, inclusive environment where students can feel safe and supported. So one of the very first steps we have is connecting that student with other students in recovery so they can have a sense of what it looks like to be a student in recovery at MSU, and that you can have a real college experience and have fun and go to have a sober tailgate and go to a football game and be sober. And so for us, it's really helping connect the student to their peers. And then I also meet with that student to help them identify what their specific needs are and how the Collegiate Recovery Community can help support those needs.
We're joined by Dawn Kepler. She is the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at Michigan State University. And so, Dawn, for those that may be hearing this and know someone that they may want to refer to the program, or they themselves want to self-report, what do they need to do in order to make that happen?
So the easiest way to get connected to the Collegiate Recovery Community is just to email or call myself as the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator. You can, probably the easiest email to remember would be recovery@msu.edu, and that comes directly to me, and then I help our students get in contact with the other students on campus. And also let them know that every Thursday night we have our CRC All Recovery meeting here on campus in the basement of the Student Services Building in the CRC Student Recovery Lounge. And so that's another great way where students are able to not only get support through that peer support meeting, but also meet other students navigating recovery on campus. And so we have students who find us both ways, either find out online about our weekly All Recovery meeting and show up and have the opportunity to meet other students, or who have a chance to talk to myself as well as our CRC student leader first, help them get acclimated with what the CRC is and its services and how we can help support them. And that can sometimes be helpful for students because it can be intimidating walking into a room for your first time and meeting a group of new students. So sometimes the one-on-one approach can be really helpful for our students in recovery, or who are new to recovery in particular.
And Dawn, where can people find more information on this program?
That's a great question. So information can be found on our website. So that is MSU's health promotion website. And you can also go on our social media. So the CRC also has accounts on Instagram, on Twitter, as well as on Facebook.
On Twitter, that is at MSU_recovery for those that are looking for the social media handles that will take them to the website. The website itself is healthpromotion.msu.edu/recovery, or you just go to healthpromotion.msu.edu, and at the top of that page, click on the link that says recovery. We're joined by Dawn Kepler. She's the Collegiate Recovery Community Coordinator at Michigan State University. Dawn, anything else that would be important for our audience listening on campus or hearing this from off campus across the state today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I think is not as well understood is that students in recovery with appropriate supports in place are some of the most successful students on campus. And so our students have shown this in addition to national research. So 100% of MSU CRC students have cumulative GPAs above a 3.0, and 50% have a 3.5 or higher. And so that is what makes this work and these supports so essential, is that these students do the most amazing work on campus, are the most dedicated to their academics, often working hard at other jobs in the community and giving back through community service. And with the proper supports in place, they have some of the highest GPAs on campus. They go on to graduate and do amazing things. And so I really feel fortunate to work with this population of students in recovery, because they are amazing students and just amazing individuals in general.
Well, Dawn, thanks for joining us and telling us more about this really important program that is available to students on campus at Michigan State for both those that may be in need of recovery and want to take those steps, or others, family members, friends on campus or off campus that may be noticing some unusual behavior that points toward the signs of a substance or alcohol misuse or abuse issue, that they can refer their friend, their loved one to a community that is welcoming and that it will be helpful in their recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, the website for the program is healthpromotion.msu.edu, and then click on recovery, or you can follow them on Twitter at @MSU_recovery. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we'll go from our colleges to our high schools, and we'll be speaking about high school athletics with the communications director, Geoff Kimmerly from the Michigan High School Athletics Association, or the MHSAA. That is coming up next. You're watching and listening to the Megacast.
Who is struggling right now?
I am.
My son is.
Many are struggling with anxiety, depression, and substance use. Before it becomes a crisis, reach out to MyCal, the Michigan Crisis and Access Line, for free confidential support 24/7. Available in the Upper Peninsula and Oakland County. Just call or text 1-844-44-MyCal or chat online at michigan.gov/MyCal. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
I couldn't breathe at all. There was lots of talk about putting me on a ventilator. I thought I was gonna die. I was 39 weeks pregnant and had a scheduled C-section. During that time, I got COVID and was hospitalized for a month. I had a blood clot in my lungs. It caused me to go into right-sided heart failure. I was really scared. I kept texting my husband and my mom, telling them how scared I was, and I was worried that he was gonna grow up without a mom. And then I was worried if, when I did get home, that he wouldn't know who I was. You know, being 27 and a mom and a wife, and having that all almost taken away from me. It's scary, and if a vaccine can prevent that from happening, why not? Get your vaccine. I don't want this to happen to anybody else.
Motorcyclists are hard to see. To keep everyone safer, it's important to always look for them and know where most crashes occur. 84% of motorcycle and vehicle crashes happen on streets, not highways. And most crashes with motorcyclists occur when vehicle drivers are turning left. So before turning, especially to the left, make sure you look for motorcyclists. Then look again. It could save a life.
Back to the Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe, alongside our studio producer and board operator, Calvin Brown, here in our studios at Green Media Center in West Bloomfield Township. But we're broadcasting not just in the greater West Bloomfield area or in Oakland County. We're all across the state of Michigan on a number of different television, radio, and web outlets. Find more information about each and every one of those and their other programming outside of our live Megacasts Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon by going to our website at civiccentertv.com/Megacast. There you'll also find all of our full episodes and our individual interviews on demand, usually by mid to late afternoon after our live shows. We'll cap off today's edition of the show talking about sports. We're pleased to be joined once again by Geoff Kimmerly. He is the communications director at the MHSAA, or the Michigan High School Athletics Association, and he joins us again now on the Megacast. Geoff, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. How are you today?
Doing all right. How are you?
Hanging in there.
Good. So we are in the thick of the fall sports season. We're nearing playoff time, or have entered playoff time in the fall season across the state of Michigan. It's a lot different of a situation than it was a year ago. It's still a very intricate situation. It's still complicated for athletic directors, certainly for the MHSAA as well. But are things going smoother this year than they had a year ago?
Yeah, I of course wouldn't say we're completely back to normal. Obviously, COVID is still out there, and we're still feeling the effects of that. But things are certainly different than they were a year ago. We had a number of games last year in every sport canceled because of COVID. We've still had some of those this year, but in football, which we track every result because of playoff points and postseason qualification, it's about half as many. have been because of COVID this season as opposed to last season. Things, golf, for example, golf in the fall for girls for Lower Peninsula last season was a one-day tournament because we didn't want teams that had to travel far away, staying overnight, things like that. We're back to having our traditional 2-day tournament. Our boys tennis finals are this weekend in the Lower Peninsula. We're back to having our traditional format for that after changing things up a year ago as well. So we were able to get a lot of things back to, quote unquote normal. But at the same time, we're still building back up from a year ago. That took a toll on everyone in a lot of different ways, and high school athletics was certainly among those.
We're joined by Geoff Kimmerly. He's the Communications Director for the Michigan High School Athletic Association, or the MHSAA. Talking about the continuation of the fall sports season, has yet to have any sort of a stoppage, as opposed to last season where there were multiple stoppages due to COVID-19. But like you said, things are not back to normal, and in high school football in particular, there are some similarities to last year. And there was an article from MLive. Patrick Nothaft of MLive wrote an article recently about COVID's contribution to a record number of forfeits so far this season due to COVID-19 and other factors as well. It's not just COVID. So far, 74 games have been decided via forfeit. According to the MHSAA's online database, that is only the second highest single season total in comparison to, of course, last season, where there were 94 in a shortened 6-week regular season and playoff period. How is this becoming a problem? Has this been a growing problem across the state with having these forfeits going on? How may that impact the continuation of the season, especially the way that the playoffs are situated through the MHSAA?
Sure. When it comes to the playoffs, this shouldn't affect anything. Unfortunately, we could certainly have a COVID-affected situation where we have to have a forfeit during the playoffs. We had a number of those last season as well. So that's something that, perhaps we should anticipate. But these other reasons that really have contributed to probably about half of our forfeits this year, those things are usually out of the way by the time we get to the playoffs. Every year we have teams that decide, when we ask during the spring if you'll have a sport, we have teams say they will, and then they don't, because they find out over the summer they don't have enough interest for participation to be able to have a full varsity team, especially in a sport like football, where you either have 11 or 8 players on the field. It takes substantially more to field a team. So we've had a number of those this year, and that's led to some forfeits. We had 3 teams, I think, total mid-season or right before the season started, moved from 11-player to 8-player football because of numbers. And so that created a number of forfeits there as well. The teams that are receiving forfeit wins in these cases oftentimes do pursue a different game, but with schedules already made well in advance, it's difficult to do. So, as I told Patrick for that story, we have, like I just said, about half as many COVID-related forfeits as we did a year ago, but you add that into the normal stuff, like teams not having enough numbers and things like that, or teams running low on players simply because of injuries as well. That happens every season too. And that's really what's led to where we're at right now with forfeits. Do I think it's going to become a problem that does something to our season this year? No, I don't. We only have 2 weeks left of the regular season. We have found a way to award teams still that have to take a forfeit win. And we are almost to the playoffs. And after that, the teams that are struggling with numbers, for the most part, will not be participating still.
And just for reference, Geoff did mention that teams have been seeking to reschedule with other opponents in the case where they do have a forfeit happen, and in that case, that is done at the local level. That is between the athletic directors of these schools. We're joined by Geoff Kimmerly. He is the Communications Director at the Michigan High School Athletic Association. Something else that was referenced recently in an article from WXYZ Channel 7 TV is that games such as Mount Clemens and their varsity football homecoming game were cut short, were canceled due to referee shortages. staffing has been an issue across industries in the state of Michigan, and it really hasn't discriminated against one industry versus the other or one business versus the other. What is the status in terms of referee availability through the MHSAA for fall sports and as we prepare for winter sports at this time?
Well, and that football game, that is really the only varsity football game that I know of that has not been able to be played this season out of about 2,100 games. But there have been soccer games that haven't been able to be played. I would imagine there are other sports that we don't have to track as closely for postseason purposes that have had to cancel events as well. We have had some football games moved to Thursdays because of a lack of available referees. And obviously COVID last year took a toll in all of our sports. In football, I just got the latest updated numbers. So a year ago, we went down about 13% in football registration for officials. We've come back about 3% from that this year, but obviously there's still a long way to rebuild. All of our sports in 2020-21 had, I think almost all of them have had some sort of double-digit decrease in officials registrations. So we are trying to rebuild those ranks, obviously. But what we're seeing with football specifically is we're at a point right now where we've still been able to cover all of our varsity games but one this season. But again, some of them have had to be moved to Thursdays. We always have some that are played on Saturdays. And what we've really lost at this point is our flexibility. Last Friday, when those storms were moving across the Lower Peninsula, I was pretty worried because I knew a number of schools would probably have to play deep into the night just so they could keep their officials for that night, because moving to Saturday is not an option when a lot of our officials are also doing college football. That's where we're at now. Our numbers are at a place where we really don't have a lot of flexibility anymore. And that goes back to our recruiting. It goes back to the work we need to do to retain officials and the reasons that officials oftentimes decide not to come back after a year or two.
And what, if already, is in place in terms of, for the hiring process, in terms of incentives, signing bonuses, other benefits that may be there for those that may be interested in joining the ranks of the referees in the MHSAA?
We do a lot of our focusing now on getting younger people involved. We have a legacy program where we work with high schools to identify students who are potentially candidates to become officials. And we do things there where we waive registration and we set those individuals up with mentors and get them involved in local associations and do some things there to create some support and some opportunity at our lowest levels of sport to get some experience and hopefully get them involved in officiating and bring them into that for years to come. Otherwise the incentives are just what you would expect. It's a great way to stay involved in athletics. It's a great way to get some exercise. It's a great way to make hundreds and hundreds of extra dollars. I know some officials who do this almost every night of the week during the spring, and it's a major part of their income. So it really is a great thing to be part of. At the same time, when we try and find out why we have officials leaving after a first year or first couple of years, we hear the same stuff over and over again. A lot of it is dealing with poor spectator behavior, especially for our young officials who are just learning and getting going in something like this. Things have just seemingly gone downhill when it comes to the treatment they receive from the stands. And hopefully people can start to realize that we are at perhaps not a breaking point, but approaching some sort of point where our behavior is going to lead to us not being able to play as much as we'd like to.
We're joined by Geoff Kimmerly. He is the communications director for the Michigan High School Athletic Association, or the MHSAA, with us today on the Megacast. And Geoff, there's been a lot of discussion recently through some viral posts and also some interesting articles and news, such as the Lansing School District raising its GPA requirement for student athletes from 1.67 to a 2.0. Being that the MHSAA understands that most of the student athletes across the state of Michigan, this is the highest level of sport that they will ever play at. There will not likely most students likely will not play at the collegiate level, certainly at the professional level, and that this is where their athletic career ends. But it's an educational opportunity more than anything. Are there any discussions at the MHSAA or any points of view from the MHSAA on putting a greater emphasis on ensuring that student athletes are putting a really concerted focus on their grades and improving their grades while they're in high school playing these sports?
Well, what the MHSAA does is it creates a minimum where students have to pass 66% of a normal credit load in order to participate. Many schools have higher minimums than that. We give them a baseline. A lot of districts build on that. So, we anticipate that will continue. The reason our baseline is where it is because that allows flexibility to schools that do things differently all over the state. We actually had it a little bit different into 2008, and then a lot of schools began going to a quarter system instead of a semester system. And so we changed things around to go with the 66% of the credit load because that's what our schools wanted to have in order to be able to build on it and do some things. So what we have right there, again, we have the minimum that must be done that allows our schools to build on that specific to their situation. And that's what a lot of schools are doing, Lansing schools included.
Geoff Kimmerly joins us. He is the communications director for the MHSAA. Geoff, just another minute or so with you before we'll say goodbye today. Is there anything else at this moment in time that people should be aware of as we continue through the fall season and approach the winter sports season, or any other information that we haven't discussed yet today?
We're just excited to get deep into the postseason with a lot of these sports. As I mentioned, golf and tennis are finishing up this weekend. As we get into November, obviously, cross country and soccer, and then volleyball and swimming and diving, and finally football at Ford Field. And, while all of this feels a lot more normal than it did, people need to keep in mind that there are some places where there are local restrictions for inside sports, indoor sports. And so they should be paying attention to that if their team is going on the road. And I think people just need to keep in mind that we have so much more even now than we did a year ago when we did take a pretty large break and have to come back in January. And I know I'm certainly not taking that for granted. And I know a lot of people in our athletic community aren't either. And so that's always going to be in the back of my mind as we go into a very busy next 6 weeks.
Well, Geoff, we appreciate your insight on the fall sports season, on some of the continued COVID-related issues that continue to affect our sports here in the state of Michigan at the high school level, and how the MHSAA and our schools are working through those issues. Thanks for your time.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Geoff Kimmerly, he is the communications director for the Michigan High School Athletic Association, or the MHSAA. Big thank you to Geoff, as well as all of our other guests today. Dawn Kepler, the director of the coordinator of the Collegiate Recovery Community at Michigan State University, for joining us. Latanga Hopes, media relations specialist at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, as well as Dave Dulio, professor of political science at Oakland University and director of its Center for Civic Engagement, which does have a sports-related panel that will be happening on Thursday, a virtual panel discussion at 7 o'clock Thursday night entitled The Changing Landscape of College Athletics, which also affects many of our high school athletes that we've just been talking about with Geoff Kimmerly. Big thank you to our entire crew, Larry Nyland, our booking producer, and our Zoom producer, for getting all of our guests booked on the show and then getting them ready to come on the day of their interviews as well. Also, big thank you to Calvin Brown, our studio producer and our board operator. If you want to learn more information about all of our partnering television, radio, and other media outlets that join us on our live shows Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, or find any of our interviews from today's show or any of of our other shows, as well as full episodes on demand, go to our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast. And then right next to that, we have civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. There we have really important information about COVID-19, as well as a number of other important issues that are making news each and every day through articles from great local journalists that we put up in summary on that page, and then provide a link so you can read the full articles and support local journalism as well, and helpful links from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the state of Michigan, and the Oakland County Health Division, so that you can learn more important information, factual information as well from these institutions that are doing great research on COVID-19. On Civic Center TV, The Splash with Maddie Mushkin is next, and more great programming also on My Michigan TV. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m.